Your Excellencies, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission was organized at the invitation of the Government of Guyana to observe the general and regional elections of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana held on March 2nd, 2020. The 17-member observation mission comprised nationals of Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Dominica, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. The mission was led by Cynthia Combie, Martyr, chairperson of the St. Lucia Electoral Commission. The mission comprised persons of extensive experience and technical expertise, including commissioners and executive officers and officers of various CARICOM electoral management bodies and electoral departments, directors and supervisors of elections, and chief elections officers. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission is supported by the CARICOM Secretariat. Unfortunately, the CARICOM election observers did not have the opportunity to witness the advance poll of the discipline services, which was held on February 21st, 2020. But from all accounts, it is my understanding that the Guyana Elections Commission recorded an 81% voter turnout. However, a preliminary assessment of the pre-election environment of the country was attained following my arrival in Guyana on February 24th, 2020. This evaluation was formulated from various meetings and discussions held with several key stakeholders, including electoral and government authorities, representatives of political parties, trade unions, civil society and religious groups, and other election observation missions. On polling day, the CARICOM election observers were deployed to polling stations in regions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. We visited approximately 360 polling stations across the country, and we feel satisfied to report the following preliminary observations. As it relates to the conduct of the poll, CARICOM election observers who witnessed the election process and the conduct of the poll from opening to closing through to the subsequent counting of the ballots formed a preliminary assessment of the poll and were impressed by the efficiency, competence, and professionalism of the poll officials in carrying out their duties. This is a demonstration of the level and standard of the training provided by GCOM. Throughout the day, polling progressed smoothly in a peaceful environment and in an orderly manner. There was generally excellent knowledge of the process by the polling officials and compliance with and adherence to the rules and regulations. There were, however, some minor issues which were identified, which were mostly resolved and which, in the mission's opinion, were not significant to materially affect the overall outcome of the poll. Polling was executed smoothly, with acceptable delays relating to persons to whom oaths and declarations had to be administered by the presiding officers. Generally, a pleasant atmosphere of peace and calm amongst electors, with no sign of hostility amongst electors. The observers did not observe any incidents of violence. As it relates to the physical accommodation in polling stations and polling places, stations were located in private homes, schools, and other public buildings, and those met the GCOM standards in terms of general layout. However, CARICOM observers were concerned about the following. One, access ramps and other support structures to the polling stations, polling places for differently abled members of Guyanese society were not always available. 2, school-located polling stations that had ground floor access were not utilized and instead were located in the upper floors, thereby creating undue serious difficulty for differently abled electors. That notwithstanding, CARICOM observers were impressed by the special consideration and additional assistance given to differently abled electors by presiding officers, other GCOM staff, and EDA volunteers. These acts were certainly commendable. 3, signage on polling stations and directions to electors was not large enough, and placement was such that the signs were not always easily visible. It was felt that this may have contributed to the electors walking into the wrong stations and having to spend precious voting time relocating. With larger, clearer, defined signage, this challenge could have been averted. 4, space within stations was not always appropriately utilized, but for the most part, polling stations were thought to have been reasonably well organized to accommodate electors. We noted, however, that even in those stations where we felt that the physical accommodation did not meet the desired standards, the level of professionalism displayed by polling staff was beyond question. These deficiencies, we believe, must be addressed by GCOM to ensure that the standard requirements for polling stations are achieved and maintained. As it relates to the conduct of presiding officers and other polling day officials, CARICOM observers found the polling day officials at polling stations to be pleasant, efficient, experienced, and generally professional. We noted some minor instances in which presiding officers were a bit agitated in dealing with polling agents, but it was felt that these instances were not significant enough to hinder the administration or the quality of the poll. We noted that poll officials could have done more to scrutinize the fingers and hands of voters for any visible signs of previous voting. But having said that, the process of voter identification was appropriate to avert the possibility of double voting or voter fraud of that kind. We consider that due recognition be given to the security staff at those polling stations who clearly understood their role of protection and maintenance of calm in order to ensure safety at the polling stations on polling day. They were also pleasant and welcoming as they acknowledged electors' entry into the polling places and polling stations. CARICOM observers noted several instances of fast-tracking of mothers with young babies and differently abled persons by the security officers in the interest of creating an environment that was truly conducive to a successive poll. Conduct of voters. As it relates to that, the conduct of voters was remarkable, responsible, calm, and orderly. The people of Guyana should be proud of themselves, and this mission salutes GCOM and the citizens of this country for the peaceful conduct of the poll. CARICOM observers had some other concerns, largely about the following issues. 1, the status of polling day officials and workers. CARICOM observers noted that poll workers were allowed to leave their respective stations to go out and vote, and there were times when poll workers were noticeably absent, which could effectively, and in some instances, slow down the polling process. In this regard, it is one of the recommendations of the CARICOM observers that provision must be made to include poll workers in the advance poll. During a count, as it relates now to the mixing, the intermixing of ballots of the discipline services, during a count at one of the polling stations in Georgetown, An issue arose relating to the incorrect folding of the ballots cast by the discipline services in the advance poll and subsequent stamping of the ballot by the presiding officer at that polling station on polling day during the intermixing of the two sets of ballots. The effect was that the verification stamp was not properly applied and resulted in the ballots appearing to be double stamped or not stamped in the correct location on the ballot or not stamped at all. This resulted in what the observers considered to be a valid vote from the standpoint of those electors being declared by the presiding officer at the count on election night as being deemed a spoilt or a rejected or an invalid ballot which could not be included in the count. That declaration was obviously vigorously opposed by the party agents present at the count. The presiding officer, however, did advise on the option for the party's agent to lodge queries in respect to those ballots and to do so within 24 hours of polling day. Whilst the number of these ballots in the particular polling station was relatively small, CARICOM observers are concerned that an elector who, having exercised his or her franchise by casting his or her vote, would, through no fault of that elector, be deprived of a count of a vote for the party of his or her choice. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission is committed to ensuring the preservation of the democratic process and to make certain that every valid vote cast must be counted in order to be regarded as a vote for the party of the elector's choice. The mission recommends that these matters must be addressed by GCOM in terms of education and training of polling officials as regards intermixing of the ballots. Tabulation of results. The mission applauds GCOM for a job reasonably well done as it relates to the conduct of the poll and poll activities on polling day, including the count, issue and presentation of statements of poll on election day. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission will await the publication of the final official results and will provide a full and final report comprising observations and findings of its detailed and objective assessment of the poll of March 2nd, general and regional elections, together with its recommendations. Accordingly, following on the mission's preliminary observations and assessment of information obtained from stakeholders and CARICOM observer teams, and subject to the submission of a full and final report to CARICOM's Secretary General, the mission concludes that the March 2nd, 2020 poll was free, fair, and transparent, and the mission expects that the results of the poll will reflect the free expression of the will and aspirations of the Guyanese people for a government of their choice. CARICOM Election Observation looks forward to the publication of the official results as soon as is practicable. The mission wishes to congratulate the Guyana Elections Commission and staff, poll officials and political parties, and wishes to thank the media and all stakeholders, and more importantly, the people of the Corporate Republic of Guyana for their warm welcome and cooperation